is a deep-seated tendency within the human being to try and control life. This impulse appears very early, often unnoticed, and it disguises itself as responsibility, safety, planning, or even wisdom. But if we look more closely and honestly, we begin to see that most of this drive to control does not come from clarity, but from fear. The fear of not knowing what's coming, the fear of losing something precious, the fear of being hurt or being seen as weak or not succeeding. It is fear that gives rise to this imaginary controller inside us, and yet this controller is only a phantom. It is not real. It is not who you truly are. It is a construct made of thoughts, projections, past experiences, and a sense of identity shaped by conditioning. It says, if I don't take charge, things will fall apart. But who is this I that feels responsible for holding the world together? It is the mind dressed up as the self. The mind wants to manage life, manage people, manage the future, as if everything must pass through its filter in order to be safe. But life itself does not depend on the mind to function. Life flows effortlessly without consulting your plans. When the mind believes it is in control, it feels temporarily safe, like a captain at the helm of a ship. But this safety is shallow and fragile. One unexpected wave, a delay, a loss, a broken plan, and this sense of control shatters. In its place comes anxiety, confusion, sometimes even anger. Why? Because the idea that we were ever in control is false. And when a false belief is exposed, it hurts. But this pain is not your enemy. It is the beginning of awakening. You begin to see that control is not the same as harmony. They are not synonymous. In fact, the more you try to control, the more tension you bring into your system. You begin to live in your head, projecting outcomes, worrying about timelines, micromanaging details, trying to shape others' perceptions of you. It becomes exhausting, and yet something inside refuses to let go. Why? Because the controller believes that letting go equals chaos, failure, collapse. But this belief is itself the source of suffering. What the mind does not understand is that life does not need its control to function. The sun rises and sets without your effort. Your breath goes in and out without needing to be managed. Your heart beats without instructions. A seed breaks open in the dark soil, reaching toward the light without anyone guiding it. This is the mystery and intelligence of life, and it is already perfect, already functioning, without needing a manager. So, then what is really going on here? The one who feels it must control everything is not the true self. It is only an idea of who you think you are, a self-image born from memory and fear. This I is an imagined doer, a mental character that believes it is directing the movie of life. But the more closely you look, the more you will see. This controller is itself being observed. Something watches it. Something sees the thoughts of planning, of worry, of anticipation. That something is not caught in the story. That something is the awareness behind all of it. That is what is real. And this is a crucial moment to recognize that you are not the controller. You are the witness of the controller. When this seeing becomes firm, a space opens up inside, a sacred space of silence. You realize, I don't have to carry the weight of life on my shoulders. Life is already being carried. I only imagined it was my burden. In that space, the grip begins to loosen. The mind softens. The body exhales. You begin to see the beauty of not knowing, the grace of trust. The fear that drives control starts to dissolve in this light of awareness because it is exposed. Fear thrives in the dark, in unexamined habits and unquestioned beliefs. But when you begin to observe it without panic, without judgment, you start to see that fear has no power of its own. It only borrowed your belief, and when you stop believing it, it cannot sustain itself. The one who tries to control out of fear loses its fuel. Now something deeper begins to emerge, a quiet strength, not the kind of strength that resists or dominates, but the strength that comes from alignment with truth, with being, with life itself. It does not need to control, it simply is. In that is a power far greater than any mental strategy. Because it comes not from force, but from presence. There is a vast difference between control and clarity. Control is tense, restless, anxious. Clarity is still, effortless, clean. Control manipulates and clings. Clarity sees and allows. The one who controls sees separation between itself and life. I must do this or else life won't work. The one who sees clearly realizes, I am not separate from life. I am life itself. When this is seen, control becomes unnecessary. Not because life is predictable, but because trust is born. Not blind trust, not passive laziness, but a living trust grounded in direct experience. Control may appear to bring temporary results, but it cannot bring lasting peace, because peace is not the product of a controlled environment. Peace is your natural state, covered only by the turbulence of grasping and resisting. When the need to control falls away, peace rises naturally, because it was never gone. It was only overlooked. The irony is, the more we try to hold on, the more fragmented we become. The more we let go, the more whole we feel. This is not a philosophy. It is a truth you can experience directly. You don't need to adopt any belief, just notice. Watch how the controller rises when fear is present. Watch how it clings when things feel uncertain. And watch how even this can be witnessed effortlessly by the still presence within you. That witnessing presence does not control, it simply is, and in its isness everything flows, everything unfolds. Not always according to your personal plan, but always in a higher order that the mind cannot grasp, but the heart can recognize. Life has never asked for your permission to exist. It doesn't pause for your decisions or wait for your approval. Even before you were born, life was already moving. The stars were already burning in the sky. The rivers were already flowing toward the ocean. The wind was already whispering through the trees. You did not start life. You simply arrived in it, like a wave rising out of the ocean, already included, already supported, already part of something far greater than the mind can comprehend. There is a sacred rhythm to life, an intelligence that we cannot manufacture but can begin to notice. And yet, the human mind imagines itself to be the central controller, the one who must plan every step, who must secure outcomes, who must ensure that everything is going according to a personal script. But this script is always imaginary. It exists only in thought, and it often brings tension, worry, and dissatisfaction. Why? Because life rarely conforms to the mind's expectations, and when it doesn't, the imagined controller suffers. But what if you began to look more closely, more honestly, without the mind's constant interference? What would you find? You would begin to see that life, in its raw unfolding, has a natural intelligence. It knows when to move, when to be still. It knows how to restore balance without being instructed. A child grows in the womb without needing lessons. A flower opens to the sun without consulting a calendar. The body heals itself, the seasons shift, the tides rise and fall, all without being managed by thought. This is not randomness, It is not chaos. It is a deeper order, one that includes both the seen and the unseen. The more deeply you observe, the more you will see that life unfolds on its own terms. And not only does it unfold perfectly. Not according to personal preference, not always according to comfort or predictability, but perfectly in terms of growth, clarity, and awakening. Sometimes the mind will say, this should not be happening, and yet what is happening is already here. It does not need your approval. It only asks to be seen without resistance. When you stop trying to shape every moment, when you stop interfering with what is, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to recognize a peace that was always present, hidden beneath the noise of control. It is not a peace that comes from everything going your way. It is a peace that comes from not needing things to go any particular way. It is the peace of alignment with life itself. You may think that without control, life would become meaningless or chaotic. But what actually happens is that you become more attuned, more available, more aware. You begin to see the subtle signs, the inner movements, the intuitive nudges. You begin to sense when to act and when to wait. You move not from fear, but from clarity. You speak not to convince, but from presence. In this space, spontaneity and wisdom are not opposites. They are one and the same. The you that believes it must orchestrate everything is not the true self. It is a role, an identity shaped by memory, habits, and conditioning. It says, I am the doer, I must make life happen. But this sense of doership is only an idea, and ideas are not permanent. They arise and fall within the greater field of awareness, the same awareness that you are. This awareness is not trying to control anything. It simply observes. It allows. It includes everything without effort. As you begin to rest in this natural awareness, the sense of urgency softens. The rush to fix, to figure out, to force outcomes, all of it begins to dissolve. You start to live more like nature, rooted in stillness, responsive without anxiety, open without attachment. You become like the tree that bends in the wind but does not break, because it is not resisting the flow. It is not fighting with the elements. It trusts the deeper rhythm. Even challenges and difficulties, when seen without the filter of resistance, begin to reveal their hidden grace. What the mind calls a problem may in fact be a doorway to greater insight. What feels like loss may actually be space being made for something more aligned. Life removes what is false to make space for what is true. But this process cannot be understood while clinging to control. It can only be lived, surrendered to, allowed. In this allowing, the burden of control begins to lift. You realize that you are not at the center of life trying to manage it. You are part of life, inseparable from its unfolding. You are not a separate self making things happen. You are a happening within the totality. You are not a wave trying to direct the ocean. You are the ocean expressing itself as a wave. And in this seeing, the imaginary distance between you and life collapses. The freedom that arises in this space is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, vast, unshakable. It is the freedom of not needing to know what comes next. It is the freedom of realizing that the deepest truths do not need to be controlled. They need only to be lived. When you stop interfering, you don't become passive, you become present, fully here, fully awake, no longer projecting into the future or rewriting the past, but alive in the unfolding moment. This moment is not the result of your planning. It is not an achievement. It is a gift, fresh, mysterious, and complete. And it is only available when the noise of control subsides, when the grasping loosens, when you step back from trying to direct the flow and begin to trust it instead. Not because someone told you to, not because it's a spiritual idea, but because you have begun to see for yourself. Life unfolds with an intelligence far beyond the reach of thought. It does not need your version of perfection. It is already whole, already moving in harmony with something sacred and unseen. There is a kind of effort that the mind is addicted to. It believes that to be free, one must fight, push, and strive relentlessly. This belief is so deeply embedded that many people wear struggle like a badge of honor, as though peace and happiness must be earned through pain. But the truth is more silent, more subtle. Real freedom is not the reward at the end of the road of struggle. It is discovered the moment the struggle is seen through and released. What keeps us bound is not life itself, but the constant resistance to what is, the inner friction that comes from trying to control the uncontrollable and fix what was never broken. Struggle begins when we identify ourselves with the mind's version of reality. The mind creates expectations, attachments, and personal narratives about how things should be. It says, my life should look like this. People should treat me like that. I should be further ahead by now. These thoughts may seem reasonable, even justified, but they are often the very source of suffering. Because the moment life doesn't match these mental pictures, resistance arises. We tense up, we blame ourselves or others, and we begin trying to force life to obey our imagination. This is struggle, a tension between what is and what we wish it to be. The false self, the psychological identity, the ego, thrives in this tension. It builds its sense of reality from conflict, drama, and effort. It feels alive when it is fighting for something or against something. But this kind of aliveness is not peace. It is restlessness. The ego wants to remain in control, and to do that, it must maintain the illusion that things are not okay as they are. So it manufactures problems even where none exist. It creates stories of lack, of fear, of urgency. And then it convinces you that you must fix it all through more doing, more thinking, more striving. But look closely and you will begin to see a different possibility. What if the need to struggle is itself the root of your suffering? What if freedom does not come through conquering, but through letting go of the one who thinks it must conquer? To surrender is not to give up in weakness. It is to give up the illusion that you were ever the doer, the controller, the one in charge of this life. Surrender is the recognition that life is already happening, already flowing, and you are not separate from it. You are not the one managing the river. You are the river. Surrender does not mean passivity or indifference. It is not about abandoning action or withdrawing from life. It is the inner posture of non-resistance. You still act, but without inner conflict. You still speak, but not from anxiety. You still move, but not from fear. Action continues, but it arises from presence, from stillness, from a clarity that is unburdened by the mind's compulsions. This is why the surrendered being appears graceful, because there is no wasted movement, no inner fight, no pretending. The idea that you must struggle to be free is itself a false teaching. It is based on the belief that freedom is far away, something to be gained later, through effort. But freedom is not an object. It is not in the future. It is the truth of your being, always present, always here. What hides it is the veil of effort, the noise of the mind constantly reaching and grasping. When the reaching stops, even for a moment, the silence that remains is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is freedom. To surrender is to stop identifying with the voice in the head that constantly says, something is missing. That voice is never satisfied. It always wants more. It always fears loss. It always believes that the present moment is not enough. But who are you before that voice? Who are you when you stop believing its commentary? In the silence that follows, you begin to sense your true nature, not as an object in time, but as the timeless awareness in which time appears. This awareness does not struggle. It does not resist. It simply is. It allows all things to come and go without clinging to any of them. In this space, the need to fight dissolves, because there is nothing to protect and nothing to lose. You are no longer the character trying to win in life's game. You are the screen on which the whole play unfolds. And in that seeing, something ancient and peaceful reawakens within you. Often, people fear surrender because they believe it means defeat. They think, if I let go, I'll lose everything. I'll become passive, I won't care, I'll fail. But this fear comes from the ego, which only understands power through control. True surrender is not defeat. It is the end of the illusion of separation. It is the realization that you are not a fragment battling against life. You are life itself, unfolding naturally, perfectly, with no need for force. And so, the struggle drops away not because you forced it to, but because you see clearly that it was never necessary. Like waking from a dream, you begin to realize that the one who was fighting was only a mental image, an idea of yourself, not the truth of who you are. This realization is not dramatic. It is not noisy. It is quiet, like dawn breaking after a long night. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to fix, nothing to improve, only the stillness of being effortlessly present. In this stillness, you begin to live differently, not as someone trying to prove or protect or possess, but as presence itself, open, aware, and at peace. You begin to listen more deeply, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. You begin to respond instead of react. You no longer see life as an opponent, but as a sacred movement in which you are fully included. This is the fragrance of surrender. It is not dull, it is not weak, it is luminous, powerful, and real, the stillness of pure awareness. All illusions begin to dissolve. Through these sharings, the one without a second, life unfolds perfectly without you, and freedom is in surrender, not struggle. We are not being called to adopt new beliefs or philosophies, but to return to the timeless truth of who we are, not as the mind imagines us to be, this person wrapped in stories, striving for control, but as the formless presence in which all experiences arise and pass. What Mooji points to again and again is not something distant or theoretical. It is immediate. It is here now. The pure space of consciousness, free from identity, is not hidden behind lifetimes of effort. It is always available beneath the noise of thought and the restless movement of ego. When we cease fighting against the natural flow of life, when we stop resisting what is, we begin to recognize the unchanging stillness that has never been touched by circumstances. True liberation does not arrive through striving, but through surrender, not by adding more to yourself, but by letting go of everything you are not. You are not the controller of life. You are life. You are not the seeker of peace. You are peace itself. And in this sacred seeing, all struggle ends, and what remains is the quiet radiance of being whole, free, and infinite.